Well, howdy y'all. My name is Randy, aka Banjo Randy, and I'm a totally blind banjo picker, but I'm also a totally blind woodworker. And y'all heard me right, I am totally blind. I lost my sight back in 2006 completely. I was born with glaucoma. They controlled it for many years. I lost the sight in my left eye over time. And then in 2006, I had another cornea, I guess about the fourth or fifth cornea transplant, and some extra laser work done as well. After that, I went blind. I guess, I don't know, June, July of 2006, and I mean blind completely. I'm not a high partial, low partial. I can't see light or anything. I don't have any light perception or nothing anymore. Now, a few things I want to say. First of all, this is an old pair of glasses I used to wear when I could see. So I know that I got some comments on a few woodworking, on one woodworking group about if I'm blind, why do I wear glasses? Well, I wear these glasses when I'm downstairs working. Not only that, I wear a full face shield as well. I hope y'all can see the face shield there. But there wasn't no need in me buying any more glasses, safety glasses, when I already had a pair of these. So I just wear these. And I don't know if y'all can tell, but they're pretty thick. But they did allow me to see at one time. But anyway, here's two of the cutting boards. I made 4 of them. This one here is wider. This particular one right here has walnut in the middle, and beside the walnut on the left and right side is maple, and then on each edge is a strip of walnut. Now this particular one right here, maple is in the middle. Left or right of that is a piece of cherry, and then on the outside edges is a piece of walnut. Now, these cutting boards started out as what's called a cutting board kit. Now, I guess about 1.5 years ago, I was on Amazon searching for some supplies and different things to get started in my woodworking. You know, lumber, what the best place to buy plywood or whatever, because I want to build furniture. But for right now, these are really about one of the smaller projects. It's easier for me to get materials, have them shipped here to the house. I ain't got to worry about trying to find a way to the store and somebody to help me grade lumber and stuff like that. But like I say, this was a cutting board kit. There was 18 pieces in this particular kit. There were 6 pieces of walnut, 6 pieces of maple, and 6 pieces of cherry. They were 3/4 of an inch thick, 2 inches wide, 16 inches long. Now, I want to say again, a great big thank you to my family and friends on Facebook and these woodworking groups that I shared the picture of these cutting boards and a couple of other projects, which was what I call my first project was a combination storage / workbench / assembly table. And the second one was a mirrored coat rack made out of red oak. And hopefully in the future I'm going to try to tell you about my workbench and how I built that and all as well. But for right now I'm going to try to explain how I did these cutting boards as a totally blind person. Again, like I say, this came in a kit, and y'all have to kind of please be patient with me, because I'm nervous right now, because like I say, I've never done a video about my woodworking, and I'm so nervous I can't see straight. A little blind humor there, folks, but I love humor. But anyway, I had some people on one of these woodworking groups ask, if I'm blind, you know, why do you wear glasses? Well, I wear, like I say, these glasses to protect my eyes downstairs, along with a face shield and other protection, hearing protection. But anyway, I also had some comments, well, if you're blind, how did you get those pieces lined up like you did, knowing what piece was what? Well, that cutting board kit, like I say, it had walnut, maple, and cherry. Now the walnut, it has a very specific smell, you know. In fact, I like the smell of walnut, but I couldn't tell the maple or the cherry. So one day I was going to go play some music, and a buddy of mine come by, and I asked him to look at this for me. I separated what I thought was the walnut, and it was, and he helped me separate the maple from the cherry. Then what I done is I took, of course they were full length pieces then, 16 inches long. I took and put a rubber band around the walnut pieces. And then at each end, put it back in the box. And then the maple pieces, I didn't put any kind of tape or rubber band on them. And I put them in the box along with the walnut. And I believe I put them edge up, you know, the edge of it up. And then the cherry pieces, I put them in the box, I believe face up. But about a week before I started the project, I wanted to make sure again that I didn't mix up any of the wood. So I had another buddy, we come by to play some music. I showed him the wood again. You know, the walnut that's a given because it was wrapped up in a rubber band. I knew that, and plus from the smell. And then I had to look again at the maple and at the cherry. And sure enough, they were right. So then what I done was I put the walnut back in the box, and I put this maple back in the box with the walnut without any tape or rubber bands or anything on it. Then the cherry pieces, I put them in a completely separate, different box. So that way I could tell what was what. And later on I'll explain the tape that's on these. So the first thing I done was I made the wider cutting boards. I made the one that has the walnut in the middle. What I done was I got the box that had the walnut and the maple in it, and then I took it downstairs, and I took the walnut out, took the rubber band off, I took the walnut to my joiner, and these edges were pretty good, but I went ahead and rejoined both edges of all 6 pieces of walnut. Now once that was done, I took them to my table saw. I got my miter gauge out. It has an auxiliary fence I put on there, and it's just a regular aftermarket Delta miter gauge. So I put an auxiliary fence on it, and then I took and set a stop on the auxiliary fence to 12.5 inches. And then I cut these pieces of walnut to length then. Once I done that, I put the pieces of walnut back in the rubber band, and then I put the offcuts also, and that's what these are. Offcuts of the walnut, this one here is too, back in the rubber band in the box. And again, I hope I'm not confusing y'all. I'm trying not to confuse myself here. But anyway, next I took the maple pieces. Of course, the maple pieces, you know, they don't have anything like no rubber band or tape on them. I did the same thing. I jointed both edges of all 6 pieces. Again, I cut them to length on the table saw with my miter gauge. Once I did that, I put the pieces of maple and the offcuts in the box with the walnut again. And I went upstairs and I got the box of cherry lumber here. And I repeated the same process. I jointed both edges on the joiner, and then I cut them to length. These are 2 pieces of cherry that was left over. And if you notice, I hope y'all can see this, there's a piece of tape at each end of this cherry. That's how I told the cherry apart from the maple, which has nothing on it. And of course the walnut, it had a rubber band on it. So next, when I got ready to do these pieces, you know, to do the glue up, I then got the walnut again, the 12.5 inch pieces. And then I took the walnut out of the rubber bands, and I took and put a piece of tape. I hope y'all can see that. I put a piece of tape on one edge of the walnut on one face, on all 6 pieces. Then I took 4 pieces of the walnut, took it back to the table saw. I set my table saw fence for, I believe, about 1 1/8 inch. But on 4 pieces that I ripped down, I tried to make sure that the tape would be where a little bit of tape would be on each side of the piece that I was cutting. You know, the 1 1/8 inch piece and the 3/4 inch wide piece would still have a piece of tape on it so I could still tell them apart. Next, what I done was I got ready to do the glue up. I started out and I glued this up in 3 pieces at a time, and I did that for a reason. I made 2 cutting boards last year. Again, I used cutting board kit, and I forget what type of lumber. It was either walnut and maple or something, I don't remember. But those right there, once I got them all glued up and everything, I had to do a lot of sanding on them. So this time I thought I would do it different. So what I've done was I took a strip of the walnut and put 2 pieces of maple. Let's see. This right here is a piece of the walnut. This right here is the maple. Of course, it was the 12 1/2 inch pieces that I glued up. These are just the offcuts. So once I got that glued up, I glued all mating edges of it. I glued it up, wiped off any excess glue and set it aside. And I repeated it with another piece of walnut and maple. I made 2 blanks this size and 2 of them this size right here. They're the same length, but the maple cherry walnut one, it's, I guess, about 3/4 of an inch narrower than this piece here. But once I got those done, I set these 2 blanks aside. Then, y'all, I am nervous, so please just be patient with me. Like I say, I've never made an actual video about my woodworking. All this is second nature to me. I don't think about it when I'm downstairs, you know, because I don't have to try to explain to nobody what I'm doing. But the smaller of the 2 cutting boards, I started off with a piece of maple. Now, if you notice, these have a piece of tape at each end, and this is the cherry pieces. And I did that because that way I know that this was the walnut. Of course, I smell the smell of that, you know, but it only has 1 piece of tape, so that's a given for me, as long as the tape stays on. But anyway, I repeated the same process with these right here. I glued all mating edges. Once that was, you know, glued up, the clamps tightened, I wiped off any excess, and then I set these aside, both of these blanks aside to dry overnight. The next morning, I took, let's see, okay, that's the cherry, all right, these are the maple. Now, these are 2 pieces of cherry that was left over, and again, that's the tape that I put to identify it from the walnut and the maple. Next thing I done was I took the blank right here that was the walnut and the maple. And what I done then was I took the piece of tape off the walnut, and I don't have a thickness planer. What I would have liked to have done was glued all these pieces together first and then run them through a thickness planer, but I don't have one. So you'll hopefully avoid a whole lot of sanding this time, like the first 2 cutting boards. That's why I glued them up in 3 strips. I took them to my joiner, and I set the joiner as shallow of a cut as I could, and I run each face through using a push paddle and push stick, so you know I didn't worry about my fingers being in the way. But I am cautious when I'm working with my equipment, because folks, I know what that stuff can do. Now I know it can be dangerous, but I know that I can also be safe as a blind person doing this. So I run the faces through, a very light pass, flip it over, and done the same thing again. And then since I didn't use any type of board, you know, when I clamped up the outside edges, I run them through the joiner again, just to get the marks from the clamps off of it. So once that was done, I done both of these blanks, the walnut and the maple, And then again, I put another piece of tape on the walnut as close as I could to the middle of the three pieces, because at the time they were, three pieces before I put these end pieces on, edges on. But I set them to a side. Then I repeated the process with this right here. Again, this blank right here is maple in the middle, and then to the outside of that, on each edge, is cherry. Of course, on the end is one other piece of walnut. So I run this through the same way. I took the tape off of it, run it through the joiner, very light, shallow pass, just to kiss the bases, as they say, and to make it nice and smooth, where I wouldn't have to do a whole lot of sanding like the first two cutting boards I made. Once that was done, again, I took and edge jointed both pieces again on both of the blanks. Next, I started with the walnut maple piece, and then I took two pieces of the other walnut that I ripped down, the 1 1/8 piece, and that's what's on these edges right here. And again, I made sure that the jointed edge of the narrow walnut piece was against the maple piece, so that I had nice tight joints right there. And another thing, since I run this through the thickness plate or the joiner, it's about 11/16 of an inch instead of 3/4. So when I glued these outside pieces on, I made sure that the walnut was just proud of both faces of the maple on both edges, and I did that for a reason as well. I wiped off any excess glue, and I done both blanks and set them aside. After that, I repeated the process, but with this blank right here, both of these, which was the maple and the cherry on each edge of that. Again, when I glued them up, I made sure that the jointed edges met the jointing edges of the cherry right here. And again, I made sure that the walnut was proud of the faces of the cherry right here on both edges, glued them up, set them aside to dry. The next morning, what I done is took them all out of the blanks. By then, I don't got to worry about tape, because this piece here is wider than this one, so I wasn't worried about mixing nothing up or anything now, because all the color arrangement's established now, because it's glued up as a complete blank. Then what I've done is I went to my router table. I had what's known as a double bearing flush trim pattern bit. This is a 1/2 inch shank. I believe it's 7/8 inch diameter. I know this is a big bit, but I've used this several times on several projects. So I chucked that up in my router table. Once I put that in the router table, I set the height above the table to where about 1 1/4 inches was above the table surface. The cutting surface right here, minus the bearing. Once I done that, got everything all locked down and like I wanted it, I then took and put an auxiliary fence on the fence on my router table. The reason I've done that is because these edges here are proud of the faces of the maple right there, and I did that for a reason. I then took another piece of wood, like I say, and made an auxiliary fence on my fence, and I held it to where it was about 1/8 of an inch above the router bit, the very tip of it. Once I put that on there, and another thing, I had to make sure that when I run these pieces through, that the very top edge of the auxiliary fence did not catch this piece of walnut on all 4 blanks, because remember, this walnut is proud of this, and if it caught it, it would lean it out, and I wouldn't have a flush trim on here. So once I established that, I took and run both faces, both edges, and I flush trimmed it to the 3 pieces, to the walnut and the maple right here. So it made a nice flat surface. Again, if I had a thickness planer, I would have done it different. I'd have glued it all up together, and then I would have made a couple light passes through the thickness planer. But folks, I mean, I'm getting started. I'm doing the best I can with tools and things. So, but anyway, after I got all 4 of these blanks done that way, then I took the blanks to my table saw again, and I put my miter gauge back on there, and then I cross cut this to get one nice straight edge right here. You know, that was 90 degrees to the edges right here. Once I did that on all 4 blanks, I then took and set up a stop block on my miter gauge to 12 inches. And then I run the opposite ends through, and that's how I come up with the 12 inches on this. Once I done that right there, it was on to sanding. Woohoo, that's the part we all love, ain't it? Yeah, right. But anyway, I started out with the 1/3 sheet sander, and I put 100 grit paper on there, and then I proceeded to sand the whole thing right here, both faces, on all 4 blanks with the 100 grit. And then I switched to my random orbit sander. It's a 5-inch random orbit sander, hook and loop. And later on in the future videos, I'll show you how I managed to line up the holes, you know, where all that will be lined up. But anyway, then I put the 120 on there, and I proceeded to sand both faces on all 4 blanks again. After that, what I done was I went back to my router table. I took out the big bit, well, wherever it's at. Yeah, right here. I took that out, and then I installed a 1/4-inch shank, 1/4-inch round over. Of course, I had to put a collet adapter in there in my router table because it accepts both 1/2-inch and 1/4-inch shank router bits. So once I done that, I had a way that I run the edge through safely with my fingers clear, and I rounded the edge on all 4 corners, and then I run each edges on both faces on all 4 blanks. And once I done that, I didn't really like the 1/4-inch round over. So after that, what I done was I took and, well, I am really nervous. Let me back up one step. After I flush trimmed all 4 of these blanks, I then took it to the joiner and jointed each face right here. Because when I clamped it up again, I didn't use anything to keep the clamps from getting into the wood, and I've done that on purpose because all 4 of these edges here, you know, was the ones that were, when I ripped them on my table saw, I put the cut edge to the outside edge because I knew I was going to rejoin everything. So again, getting back to the where I was rounding all the edges, I didn't like the 1/4-inch round over, so I switched it to a 3/8-inch round over, and I repeated the process. I rounded all 4 corners and all the edges on both faces of all 4 blanks, and I was happy with that then. The 1/4-inch round over just didn't really seem, I don't know, it just didn't feel good to me. So then after that's whenever I cross-cut everything, you know, to length then. After that, I went back to my 3rd sheet sander, and I put in 150 grit, and then I proceeded to sand all 4 blanks, both faces, all the edges, the corners. Once I had that to where I was satisfied with it, I switched back to my random orbit sander with 180 grit, and I did the same thing. I sanded all 4 blanks. I'm only showing you 2 of these right now because one of them's put up over there, and I sent one of these right here to some friends of mine that recently got married, and I hope it gives them many years of good use. But after I've done the 180, then I put on the 220, and that's the final sanding I did on it, sanding again all the edges, all the faces, the corners, everything. And then I got a piece of 220 grit and sanded it again by hand just to make sure that all the round overs felt good to me. After that process, I took and wiped everything off. Then I took them upstairs and set them on this counter here and got me an old sock, a clean sock that I had that I use. You know, it's an old pair of socks. I washed them and I use them for like wiping stuff off or, you know, wiping wax on projects or whatever. So I took that, dampened it, and then I proceeded to wipe all 4 boards on all faces and all edges, and this is called raising the grain. And I've read that if you don't do this step, when you first wash these cutting boards, the grain will raise on you. So I did that first. I wet all 4 boards, like I said, and then I waited about 20 minutes, and then I wet them again. Just dampen them to raise the grain. I let them dry overnight. Took them back downstairs with 220. Then I hand sanded all 4 boards, both faces, all the edges and everything, and got them to where they're nice and smooth. Wiped them off, and then I brought this piece of cardboard here up. And I took these 4 blanks to a spare bedroom that I have. And then what I've done was I took 4 old coffee cans and I put a bag over the top because this cutting board oil I use is kind of messy. And I set the blank up on top of that. And what I used here is called walrus oil. This is made from like cutting boards. It's a food grade safe product. I think it's made from mineral oil, beeswax, I think vitamin E, and coconut oil. But I shook it up really, really good, and I like to use this. This is what I used on the first 2 cutting boards. And I tell you folks, a little bit of this stuff goes a long way. So what I've done was I put just a little bit on there, and then how I applied it is with my hand, because it's hard for me to tell, if I'm using a rag, if it's on there good, since I can't see the product. So I just took and rubbed it all on there. And if I had any excess on the next board that was on another, like I say, I had 4 of these. So the next board I just, wiped off any of the excess onto the next one beside it. But again, I tried to rub it in as best I could on the end grain and all edges and faces. And I repeated the process, and I let this dry overnight for about 24 hours. Then I wiped it off any excess, and I repeated this step 1 more time. Again, applying it to all edges and, until all 4 cutting boards were done. And I let this dry again overnight for about 24 hours. I wiped off any excess the next day, and then I buffed it out with another clean rag, and this is the end product on it. And I don't think they turned out too bad. The people that had seen them said they looked nice. This one here is actually the bigger one. Yeah, this is the smaller, the narrow one. But again, I hope that this kind of helps explain how a totally blind person can do woodworking. I just want to say again, a big thank you to my family and friends on Facebook and these woodworking groups for the wonderful comments and compliments. Even some of the negative feedback I got. I know that as sighted people, it's hard for y'all to understand how somebody like me that's totally blind, and again, on day-to-day life, I don't wear glasses at all. I'm only wearing these to show you that I wear them when I do my woodworking to protect my eyes. But again, I hope that maybe this helped to explain that. I know maybe I didn't do a good enough job explaining it. I hope I didn't confuse y'all. And I tried not to confuse myself, because it's a lot of steps to think about. Because like I say, when I'm doing this by myself, it's second nature to me. I don't have to think, well, I got to try to show somebody or tell somebody how I did this. Now again, in the future, I hope to do a few more videos that talks about how I identify my sandpaper and different things like that. And like I say, I want to show you my actual combination storage, workbench, assembly table, and my coat rack, and we'll try to explain a few things about that as well. But I thank y'all folks for listening, and again, I hope I didn't confuse y'all or anything, and maybe y'all, like I say, have a better understanding as a sighted person how people with disabilities can overcome their disability. Excuse me. Now, I'm totally blind, I have a disability, but I do not consider myself disabled. Excuse me. And I also want to take a minute to say to anybody out there that listens to this video, especially those who have a disability, I want to say never give up on your hopes and dreams in life. Because as a disabled person, we are able to do things. All we want and hope for is just a chance to prove ourselves that we can do things. We just have to do things different. like my woodworking here. I can't see the finished product, but in my mind, I know what they look like. And again, I hope that this sheds some light to the people that can still see, you know, how a totally blind person can do woodworking and still be safe. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day and keep smiling. And for those of y'all that do woodworking, let's keep making sawdust and be safe. Keep smiling. Blessings. And by the way, I called Apple support and they helped me set up my phone where hopefully y'all can see this.
Take picture. Button.
That's some of the voiceover you're hearing.
Viewfinder. Image. 30 minutes. 32 seconds. 30 minutes. Viewfinder. Take picture. Stop recording video. Button.
So for that, blessings, y'all.
Take picture. Stop recording video. Button.